Have you ever heard of something called sound deadening paint, or some people referred to it as soundproofing paint? You know, just slap some paint on the wall and hoping that it will create some type of magical barrier where sound will not pass through. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? Well, that's exactly what I'm going to talk about in this video, not only from my experience with sound deadening paint, but other people's experience with sound deadening paint. Did they regret it? Because it's not cheap. Did they regret buying that paint and slapping it on the wall? Well, you'll find out, and it might save you from buying it. Maybe. Because a while back, someone online was asking, has anybody tried those sound deadening paint products like acoustic-coat or coat of silence is another one? They said, I'm building a room in my basement for guitars, but I don't want to spend a ton on professional foam or big renovation. If I can cut down on some of those noise leaving the room, I'd be happy. Could I just roll or spray some paint on my wall and close my eyes and hope for the best? What do you think? Well, actually the responses were pretty mixed. Some folks saw small benefits. Others said that it did next to nothing. So I dug into a bunch of comments and reviews and asked some colleagues if they use this type of paint and what was their results. In my geographical location, I can't even buy it. If I want to buy it, I have to ship it from another country and it costs 10 times more money. Go figure. First off, a lot of people notice that the paint can reduce a bit, and I say a bit, of echo or reverberation inside the space, but only when the walls were bare, meaning no picture frames on the wall, nothing. Basically from nothing on the wall to 3 coats of paint, they felt a little bit of less reverberation. One person mentioned they used acoustic-coat in their spare music room and felt it was okay at softening higher frequencies like talking or clanking objects, but they quickly realized it didn't do much for actual noise entering or leaving the room. So while it might help with the harshness of a bare wall, reflective room, it's nowhere near real soundproofing. Another big point was that the paint seemed completely useless against low frequency sounds like rumbles of a subwoofer or deep bass guitars. So if you're playing heavy riffs or pumping out the bass, a thin or even a thick coat of paint just doesn't have the mass or thickness to block those longer wavelengths. A few people tried it specifically for bass problems and said they couldn't tell any difference whatsoever. So they ended up putting thicker drywall or acoustic foam panels to handle those low-end frequencies more effectively. A few people did mention, however, that it helped a bit on metal or other thin resonant surfaces. Someone who used it on their garage door said that it dampened that tin can sound you sometimes get when you open or close the door. Kind of like an undercoating effect for cars. It reduces the door's vibration enough to be noticeable, but even then, it wasn't groundbreaking. So if you have something really thin and rattly, a special paint might help a little. But for standard home walls, it's not exactly a game changer. Cost was another common complaint. A lot of these products are sold at a premium price, often 2, 3, 4 times the cost of your typical interior paint. So if you're expecting a big difference for that extra cost, you're spending a lot of money, isn't it going to work? No. You might be You will be disappointed. Some reviewers also said, hey, for that price, I'd rather just buy normal paint than put the rest of my budget towards real soundproofing methods like mass-loaded vinyl, mineral wool, extra layer of drywall, weather strip, acoustic sealant, or even some decent acoustic panels. One thing to keep in mind is that there is a difference between sound absorption, which is reducing the echo inside a room, and sound isolation, which stops noise from leaking through the wall to the other room. This paint might do a tiny bit for absorbing the higher frequency sound, but it won't do much of anything to actually isolate the noise from the outside world. And also, more than one person mentioned that, sure, they noticed a small improvement in reverb time inside the room, but people in the next room or upstairs, they still heard everything as usual. And that leads us to the underlying reason why the paint often doesn't work for real soundproofing. First off, it just doesn't have enough mass. It's not thick enough. It won't stop the actual sound waves from going through. Effective sound blocking is all about thick, dense material, like multiple layers of drywall or heavy membranes. A layer of paint, even if it's the thickest paint that you can find, is still just a fraction of a millimeter. Second, it does nothing to decouple your walls from the studs. If vibrations can freely pass through your wall, they'll get out no matter what paint you use on your wall. And finally, it doesn't address low frequency energy very well. Bass notes and big rumbles take more than a surface coating to contain. So if you're really interested in reducing noise in your jam room or home studio, where should you invest more time and money instead of just using paint? A few great solutions come up again and again. Add an extra layer of drywall or 2 layers of drywall, and that will be a lot thicker than paint. That will actually stop some sound waves. Use mineral wool or high density fiberglass insulation inside the walls or ceiling to dampen that sound even more. The density helps absorb sound before it leaves the room. To stop those vibrations, again, paint is not going to do it. Install something called a resilient channel or isolation clips to decouple your drywall from the studs, stopping the vibration from traveling straight through, creating that air gap where vibration is just not going to go through. Also, look into something called mass-loaded vinyl, which is heavy yet flexible. Almost looks like rubber. Comes in a roll, as I said, quite heavy. It's great for hanging behind drywall or under the floor. But if you're mainly dealing with echoes in your room, acoustic panels like these can be much more effective than a coat of paint. And if you build these yourself, it can be a lot cheaper and of course look better than paint, especially for mid-range frequencies. Now, if you're in a rental or an apartment where you can't do any major constructions, you might be tempted to try this paint as a quick fix. Because it costs a lot of money, so it must work. Just keep your expectations realistic. You might see a small drop in echo, but don't expect a dramatic drop in noise transmission. Even if you're only playing acoustic guitar or a light conversation, people would say, well, Martin, it's better than nothing. Not if you're paying $50, $60, $70 a gallon. This paint isn't going to get you where you want to go. At the end of the day, sound deadening paint can soften the acoustics on a bare room to some degree, but it's not a true soundproofing product, and it will leave you, well, your pockets empty and your mind not blown. Most people who tried it said they wouldn't rely on it to keep noise from escaping or entering a space, especially if you're dealing with instrument or loud volumes or any type of noise, really, any type of noise. And really, if you have the budget and the freedom to do so, your best bet for a quieter room involves, like I said, adding mass, sealing gaps and cracks, and possibly decoupling your walls. But really, that is the scoop on sound deadening paint. If you've tried it yourself and had some type of miraculously different experience than I or others have, we'd all love to hear about it in the comment section below. In the meantime, if you want to soundproof your room and you don't really have a huge budget, video right there will show you how to do it on not a tiny budget, but probably below $100. You can actually get some sound blocking. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, assuming you click that subscribe button. Not that I ever asked you to.